Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
So let's wait like 2 more minutes for people to jump into the meeting.
Good morning.
Good morning. Okay, several people are here. I assume some people in the US are on holiday this week. So let's start with the meeting and welcome to the Hiero TSC meeting. I'm seeing some people here in the meeting that maybe I have not seen before. So let me start with some general information like every meeting of the highway project, the TSC meeting is a public meeting, which means everybody is invited to attend that meeting and everybody is invited to join discussion in this meeting, ask questions, bring in topics, and so on. And next to the TSC meeting, we have several other meetings in the Hiro community already. We have a public calendar. It's linked on our webpage in the meeting minutes on our GitHub page, where you can get an overview of all the public meetings that we are doing. Here you can see like this week, it's like 9 meetings we have and you can just click on a meeting and then you find the Zoom invite for that meeting. And for most meetings, if you missed one, let's go to the TSC meeting of last week as an example, you will find the recording online and an AI-based meeting summary created by Zoom if you want to get up to date based on some meetings you missed. And since all that is often open and public and recorded, and we ask the full community to contribute in those meetings, the meetings happens under the code of conduct and the antitrust policy of the Linux Foundation. So when you're in one of our meetings, feel free to raise your hand to join the discussion, but please always do it in a friendly manner, and then everything will be fine. Good. And while talking about that, I see several other people popped up. We have several people from the TSC here, which is great, and a lot of other people, which is even better. Welcome again to all of you, and let's start with our meeting. As in every meeting, the first agenda item is the approval of the previous minutes. And I think we're quite good here. Maybe we have one. No, all of them are already merged, which is great. So all meeting minutes of the previous meetings are up to date. Which brings us to the second topic, which is the question if there are any updates or events coming from the community, from any members that you would like to announce. Um, any specific topics, projects that you would like to share that somehow in the context of Hyro, then this would be the best place to do so. I see Diane, you're unmuted. You want to say
I,
something?
I, I unmuted. I was just going to put a reminder that the marketing meeting for Hyro meets immediately after this call.
today. So if you're in the mood for marketing or a part of a marketing team or want to help with the social engagement for the Hiero project, directly after this meeting.
Perfect. Thanks for the reminder, Daniel. And again, that meeting you can easily find in the public calendar, right? It's directly here, Hiero marketing. So I'm in Germany. That's why I have those times. For most other people, it will be a different time. Okay, thanks for sharing that, Diane. Since nobody else raises hands or is unmuted, I think that are all updates we have for today. So let's have a look at the Hiero improvement proposals. And as far as I know, yeah, we do not have one for presentation today. As you can see, we now have really a lot in draft and review mode. So I assume updates will come in near future on new HIPs that will be then presented to the TSC. But what we have today a lot are, oh, there was a Keith.
Yeah, I don't think there's a HIP for review today, but maybe we can ask the community to take a look at HIP 1313. I think because I think that one is coming soon. So the more the eyes and it's one there. I think there is a lot of comments about. There might be a lot of comments about the HIP draft. So that would be great if people could take a look at it and comment on it.
I will put it here, and I'm just seeing, so I assume that Michael, what you put in the chat regarding co-organizing the patchwork event, was about the announcement section at the beginning. So looks like Hashcraft Online will co-organize an event on syncing AI standards with MCP and X402, and looks like a lot of interesting things for our Hiero space here too. So thanks for sharing that, Michael. Any other comments on HIPs or events? Okay, good. Which brings us to our project proposals. And for people who are new here, project proposals is our workflow to bring new projects to Hiero, which means like creating new repositories under Hiero, starting a new code base, or transferring projects from another org, from a general GitHub organization or whatever into the Hiero project. And over the last 2 weeks, we had 4 of those proposals being created by the community. And looks like today all the people who created that have time to talk about it, to present that, and to answer questions based on it. And I added them here in the no specific order. I think we should start definitely with the first one because that is what we originally had on the plan for last week, but needed to reschedule it, which is the Hiero contracts repository and the Hiero Ethereum client spec. And if you want to see the text that will be presented or that gives an overview about the projects, all of them are linked. And for those projects, we have issues in the TSC repository of Hiero with a description of the project and so on. And as you can see, that one is created by Fur, who's here in the meeting, and she has prepared an overview about those 2 new projects that should be transferred to Hiero. And I think, as far as I know, you would like to share something, so I will stop sharing and get you share the screen. Is that fine with you?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, perfect. Here we go.
Let me share the screen. Go for it. Where is it? Here. So, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, let me go for it. Let me see. full screen, no worries on that part. Okay, so I'm presenting two repositories we want to create on Hiero. So mainly what we want to create is a hire contract repository and the Hiero Ethereum spec test repository. While we want to create hire contracts, we will see it a little bit after, but overall we want to increase the developer experience and also expose the reference implementation of the contract we have on Hiero. And on the other hand, for the Hiero Ethereum spec test, we want to ensure that Hiero is compatible with the EVM, also showcase which EIPs we are compatible with and which not, and also ensure and enhance our regression testing for the EVM compatibility. Let me go deeper into the first one, which is a hire contracts. So if you know, so you already know, on the Ethereum world, we have already an Open Zeppelin repository that exists. The actual community is using it. Starting with the header context, in our context, in the higher context, we have native capabilities via Ethereum system contracts that, and also being extended via hooks. We have like two ways of extending the capabilities of the EVM, and also from the native implementations, which enable users to either use EVM and native together via an EVM workflow, or leverage EVM workflows via the hooks that we are recently releasing. The proposal is to create a new repository called Hire Contract, which mimics more or less the Open Zeppelin world, where we're actually going to expose the system contracts, their interfaces, their validated wrappers, and reference implementation for hooks. That will enable us on the Ethereum world to get this smart contract source code in the repository, but also the aim is to expose a NPM library that you can install in your Solidity repository and your smart contracts and reference them, inherit them, whatever you want to do with them, instead copying it. So overall, we are increasing the user experience because our users, the community is already using that. They're copying the interfaces and implementation from one repository to another one. And what we actually want to do is expose a new repository, expose a new library that can actually be used. We have already a proposal with different structure where we separate the interfaces. We create one folder for the given services that we are exposing, also for the hooks, and different mocks and common services that give you the right structure for the repository. And then the library will include everything beside the test. And the idea is to expose it. So me as a user, I will able to use the library, importing that on my Solidity repository and inherit, extend whatever we want to do. And also I can use whatever reference implementation and interfaces I have for hooks. So I can actually easily deploy via the GA's SDK of Hiero my hook to the API. So that's the first repository. Maybe I can stop here or pause to answer any question related to this repository.
Is this just for system contracts, or is this for any contracts that Hashgraph write that they think are open source and community? So I'll give you an example. If we wrote a vault and we thought, hey, it's really good, or we decided to fork one of their Open Zeppelin contracts because it just doesn't work the way we think it should on Hedera, would they also live in here, or would they go into Open Zeppelin? Why, as a developer, why would I choose this one versus contributing to Open Zeppelin?
So Open Zeppelin does not have any system contract we actually develop, because Open Zeppelin is for the Ethereum world, not for the Hedera world. So that would be my answer for the system contracts. The aim for this repository is to include the ones that we natively expose. The ones that you're mentioning that are more community development or rapid H1 that we have done, or this kind of samples or reference implementation, the proposal is to have them on another differentiated repository that are examples another implementation. These are actually only, so this repository, the aim is to only expose the ones that actually are natively supported within the protocol, not the ones you can actually deploy in any case and use them.
Okay, so for a concrete example, we had a concrete contract that Hashgraph wrote for OTF support for Layer 0.
Yeah.
That would live in here?
No, that will live in the nowadays Hashgraph repository. They're
Okay,
totally
thank you.
I have a question, or two questions. So question one is that one depending on Open Zeppelin, like for the basic interfaces regarding tokens and things like that? Will that use the ones defined in Open Zeppelin, or is that recreated here? And yeah, so maybe you answer that first.
We are not dependent on Open Zeppelin in that end. So
Okay.
So we are mimicking Open Zeppelin. If we need to depend, should be justified. But overall, we can deploy our system contract without needing to depend on Open Zeppelin. If we need to, for whatever reason, because we want to extend whatever we want to expose on proxies, whatever we want to do there, that can be justified. But at this moment of time, we don't need to depend on any Open Zeppelin implementation, because actually our system contracts and functions are function selectors that don't depend on Open Zeppelin. Perhaps Open Zeppelin
Okay.
expose normal transfers, omens, whatever. We are not depending on them.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And the second question is, how does npm comes into play here? I mean, this is Solidity code and no JavaScript code, right? Is there no way to publish Solidity code, and that's why npm is used as a workaround? Or is there something I'm missing JavaScript related here?
Yeah, so the usual lifecycle for smart contract development is npm based. So either you use Forge or you use Hardhat. Everything is installed and managed on the npm lifecycle. Also, the dependency injection flow, or call it library, we can call it compared to Java world and Gradle. In the Solidity world, you can import external Solidity libraries via npm. That's the usual flow. The different frameworks like Forge and Hardhat allow you to import these libraries through Node.js modules. And that's
Oh,
why it's not that we're choosing npm for compared to other ones. It's because the usual Ethereum, so the Ethereum community is using this library importing way to actually get references from their Solidity smart contracts. So, for example,
okay.
so I think there's usual when you go to an enterprise grade application. If there's any backend involved, they can either build a jar file or an npm file library and import it to get the bytecode and all that stuff. But when you actually are building Solidity smart contracts and you want to reference Open Zeppelin library and the smart contract, you have two choices. Either you copy the code, which is cumbersome because they're upgrading the releases, you're not getting the new versions, whatever, or you reference the library and the version you want, and then you are managing the dependency in a better way. And that's what we aim.
Okay, yeah. And I had no idea that they use npm for it, but that totally makes sense because when I, did some examples and stuff like that with Open Zeppelin, I just copied the code. I had no idea that they use npm in general for Solidity too. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
Any other questions on the first repo, the Hiero contract repository?
So I have a quick question about discoverability. So how will we be showcasing that this is here and doing outreach and education on this topic? Is that something that's part of to grow more maintainers and contributors to this? Are you willing to do like an LFDT webinar on the topic? How will people know that this is here?
Yeah, that's good. So in one hand, once the repo is out, the library will be published, and the idea is to advocate for that from LFTD part and also from the Hashgraph part. So overall, that is like a pursued goal from the community, because that is also, we have proposed that because we know it's beneficial, but also the community is asking for that. So the idea is to promote it, because it's something that the people is pursuing. Because usually when you go for any functionality in any L1s or L2s, usually there's a library. So the answer is yes, we should do showcases in LFTT and promote it. And also on the Hashgraph side, we are willing to promote that too.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, looks like no other questions. Then move forward with the second one.
Okay. So the second repository is more related to the EVM compatible. So Hiero claims to be Ethereum compatible. For that, you need to ensure that you're compatible, and there are two ways of doing that. You actually test everything in a normal manner, or you can follow what the Ethereum community is doing. So the Ethereum community has the Ethereum spec test framework, which is actually a Python framework that every single client, when we talk client, we're talking about Hyperledger Besu, Nethermind, Geth, Aragon, all the different clients that implement Ethereum. They're executing and maintaining the test cases to ensure that the software is compatible with Ethereum. So the idea on our end is to create this new repository to ensure that Hedera is compliant where it should be, because as we know, we are not compliant with all EIPs because we have a different ABFT algorithm in Hiero. But overall, to ensure that to the ones we are compatible and the ones not, the best way to do that is to actually execute this Ethereum spec test. What we aim for is to fork the original spec test framework, maintain and update this framework frequently with the different changes we need to do locally, because overall we need to skip the EIPs we don't support, adapt some of the tested to be able to support what Hiero is supporting, and that will give us different benefits, including the extended regression testing. We will ensure that the compatibility is there, and we will somehow certify openly which EIPs we support, which ones not, and you can actually test it yourself. You can download the spec test, you can download the Hiero node and solo, and you can spin out the full set of the tools of Hiero. You can spin out the spec test and ensure that everything is working as it should. No? And that's almost what we are aiming for, to have a tool that ensures not only because we say it, we certify that with the tools that the Ethereum community is using. And on the other hand, we are ensuring that anytime we are doing a new feature or we are adding a new fork that Ethereum is adding, for example, Prague or Fusaka, which is coming soon, we're actually complying with the EIPs we should be compliant. That's overall the aim of the repository, and hand over to you to know if you have any questions or anything you want to know.
I'm sorry, I had a question. Because here you talk about the other languages like Viper in here. In the previous on the structure, it was all Solidity. So I'm curious on slide 4 whether the work in the previous proposal will also extend beyond Solidity to support these other languages as well.
Now, let me explain why we are mentioning here the different languages compared to the first one. The first one is exposing the Solidity interfaces because that's the usual way of doing that. Here in the Python framework, we are going very native. what means native and nonsense. So the different tests that the community has built is going to the different cases of the EIPs within the Ethereum. And it's testing that the opcode has the gas that it has. It's trying to ensure that the intrinsic gas is working. And it's ensuring any EIP and any test case to the EIP works. For that, they're not only using Solidity to execute, they're using Yule and some Viper cases to make it easier to test because they're complex mathematical.
Okay, so outside of the contract, it's just the test harnesses or things like that.
That's it. It's part of the
Okay.
testing
Okay, all right.
to ensure that you cover all the edge cases of the different EIPs, including the Ethereum ecosystem.
Okay, all right. No, thanks for clarifying.
You're welcome.
Any other questions on it? Okay, if there are no other questions, thanks first of all for bringing that to the TSC and for that presentation. Let me just check. We have so we do not have quorum today, which means we cannot do the voting for it here in that meeting. But I mean, the presentation is recorded, and after the meeting, I will forward a message to the TSC channel, ask all of them to have a look at the recording, and then we will either do an asynchronous voting before the next Tuesday meeting, or we will do a voting on it on next Tuesday. I think that is the best solution here. Maybe then even people have questions after watching it who are currently not here from the TSC, then I will for sure forward those questions to you. Okay, but if there are no other questions, I assume oh yeah, there's a question if you can share the slide deck.
Yeah, I
I
should
should link to that in the minutes or include it there.
Oh yeah, that would be great if you can share the link. Then we could even put it into the minutes.
Yeah, I will share it.
Thank you. Good, but I assume since there are no other questions, all people from the TSC who are here would agree on that. But we cannot vote today, which means we should move forward to the next proposal, and we have two of them, which is on the one hand the identity collaboration hub that Keith, who's in the meeting here, created, and we already had a quite quick look at it some weeks ago, but now the whole proposal is updated. And then we have the I don't know what the best name to name is, Hiero HOLHCS specs repo. Is it that how you would spell it, Michael?
Yeah. Hiero HOLHCS specs.
Yeah. Okay. So I know, Michael, you have a presentation. You have prepared a lot. Keith, how long do you think you would need for the presentation of the identity collaboration hub?
I mean, I presented it at the end of last week's meeting, so I mean, my thought would be not much, but I'm not sure.
Because then, in that case, I would like to start with you. Then we have the short one then, and then we can have the rest of the meeting for Michael and maybe discussions on that.
Oh, okay.
That is fine to everybody. Oh yeah, and I'm just seeing that Sophie just put a message here in the chat regarding the LFX mentorship program. And I haven't put it on the agenda, Sophie, because the agenda was already there, but we have this any other business at the end. So happy to talk about that as first point in any other business. And otherwise, we should move it to next week, and then I can put it on the agenda on the top for sure. Okay, so Keith, will you like
I can share.
Yeah.
I presented this last week at the TSC. And so just as a quick reminder, and this is mostly this is a joint proposal from myself, Keith at Hashgraph, and also Diane at Hedera Foundation. We're proposing to create something called the Identity Collaboration Hub. Basically, it's modeled on the existing SDK Collaboration Hub repo we have, which is supposed to be like a repo where you can bring together many different assets that are important to that community, I guess. And I'm just going to skip down. What we're talking about being in scope is, what would be in this repo is things like high-level architecture documentation, shared standards development, non-SDK code contributions like tools, utilities, proof of concepts, documentation consolidation across the identity projects, discussions around identity stuff. And now I think what's out of scope is we do have today we have the Hiero did SDK JS and the Hiero did SDK Python. Those will continue to be separate repos because they are often pulled in as dependencies. I think the other thing to note is that as we said, we do see some code living in this repo, and what we're also asking for is that the contributions to this repo can be brought in without having to come to TSC each time. Now, these will we're not talking about bringing in major projects, but bits of code that will be helpful for the identity community that meet LF rules in terms of signatures and licenses. We're asking for permission to just kind of bring those in directly without coming to Hiero each time. Okay, that's in short what it is. I'm happy to go into more detail if anyone has any questions.
Are there any questions regarding the Identity Collaboration Hub?
Maybe the one thing I forgot to mention is that we did get an approval on something called the Hiero Identity Standards repo. We got that approval maybe a couple months ago. I think that we would take that work, those standards, and we would also collapse them into this repo. So all of that standards repo would then be collapsed into the Identity Collaboration Hub as well.
Yeah, makes totally sense to me.
And maybe just on that spirit, the big goal of this is that we don't want 10 different repos for identity. We think one repo is much easier for the community as a go-to place. And that's probably the explicit purpose behind this hub is not to have an explosion of repos.
Yeah. So maybe one thing I would like to change in the description to make it a little bit more clear that this is not for SDKs or something like that. Would it make sense to say that none of the code things we will have in the Identity Collaboration Hub will publish artifacts like to NPM or whatever? Or would that not make sense?
I think we do have one code that we want to bring in that does not publish to NPM or anything, but has a Docker component to it. I don't know if that would, does that count?
I don't know. I mean, at NPM, you always have a repository linked, and you have the same a lot for other things. So if you at Maven Central, so for Java, publish something, you need to define a GitHub repo or a Git repo or a source code repo in general, where that is coming from. And I think what we should avoid is having published multiple things that are, multiple different things coming from the same repository. With Docker, I don't know, that is specific anyway, and I think there is no hard repository link to it. So I assume that's fine.
I'm fine with that rule, Hendrik. Yeah, like we already said that if something's a dependency, if it's publishing to npm or something, yeah, it should not be in this
Yeah, and maybe
unified.
that makes it just easier. And we don't need to change the file or something, but I think having that in mind is a quite good role to decide, should it be placed here or should a new repository be created? Diane.
I'm just going to put in a reminder that we have a monthly Hiero identity meeting that's also in the LFX there, where we'll be working on things that will probably inhabit this space.
Thank you. I see a message on the chat from Joseph, who's about, okay, great to have, instead of creating 100 repositories, just having one. But how can we avoid that people now put everything into this repository instead of creating new ones? And that is a little bit why I had that question, right? So I think we need to have rules. I'm not saying the rules must be 100% done and perfect here in that proposal, but having rules like we don't want to publish anything that is in the Identity Collaboration Hub. Whenever we really have a library, it should be, externalized and things like that. And next to it, that Identity Collaboration Hub will have maintainers, right? Like every of our projects. And from my point of view, that is one goal then of the maintainers of the Identity Collaboration Hub, to check what people do in the hub, and if they see something that is created there that would make sense to externalize, that should be, a topic for the maintainers to work on it, maybe bring it to the TSC, discuss within the DIT community. I would expect that to solve that issue. But I can see that issue too. But for the SDK hub, it works quite good so far, and I hope we will see the same here.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, initially, I see there being maybe 2 or 3 code contributions. We're not talking about hundreds. We're talking about maybe 2 or 3, maybe maximum over time, maybe, I don't know, 7 to 10. And I would say that if a project had a lot of momentum and a community growing around it, they themselves would ask for it to be a separate repo, because you'd want it as a separate repo. So I don't really fear that. I think if a project is big enough, it doesn't make sense to live in the SDK collaboration hub.
I agree, absolutely, yeah. And we see there that it's working, yeah. We have another comment from Sophie, who's asking why we need a new repo for that at all, and can't it be in one of the repo, maybe in its all section or something like that. And my point of view here is, because what Sophie is saying, I'm personally finding it difficult to navigate around all the community repos. I can understand that, but I think that especially those hubs, if we make them right, will be work against exactly that. Because if we say we have for the topic SDKs, for the topic identity, for the topic, I don't know, an hub with all the information in it, with links going out to the other sections, then you have good central points for one topic. And next to that, our GitHub landing page is growing. Jessica did a great work to create sections for the different communities there, with links to the meetings and so on. And I would say, if we see it's difficult to, and it's still difficult, I agree on it, but in future, when we're getting better and better, and when we see that it gets difficult to find those things, to navigate through them, then it's more an issue about documentation and creating the correct links and landing pages, instead of putting all into one. Yeah. any other questions, comments regarding the Identity Collaboration Hub?
Can you speak more about like what kind of collaboration would it is it kind of geared towards? Keith?
Yeah. So I think well, I mean it's just easier for me to share. I mean it's impossible to 100% predict, but in the kind of ideas we have in it, in the scope section is things like high level architecture documentation, identity concepts. So if you look at the SDK collaboration hub, they have all design proposals go into so we would be very similar. Design proposals would go in, standards development, and the discussions around standards development. We've had, 2 or 3 hits about that recently. Non-SDK code contributions, documentation. I don't want to read it all again, but yeah, this is the kind of ideas, Sophia. Does that make sense? You're on mute if you're talking.
Yeah, I mean I suppose I don't know too much about the topic. So yeah, just curious about that. But thanks.
Perfect. Okay. Thanks, Keith, for presenting it 2 times. Sorry for that, first of all, but I think we're here on a very good way, and hope to get that through at least on the next TSC meeting. Which means we come to the final project proposal, which is the Hiero HOL HCS specs. And yeah, Michael, you are here, and I will hand it over to you.
Yeah, and I realize that we're at the tail end of the meeting here. So I think the next time, if we want, I can also represent this if required, and we can go through it just for verbosity and clarity. I will share my screen because this set up a presentation that covers it. You can also go away, Notion. There's a GitHub proposal that kind of covers this, but this is a more visual presentation to get everyone aligned. So just some context to set the room. First of all, what is Hashgraph Online? I serve as the president of Hashgraph Online, and we develop open source standards that have over 32 million transactions in mainnet, along with tools and services for a fully on-chain and decentralized agentic internet. Hashgraph Online and its standards, including those like OpenConvey and HCS1, are governed by 10 leading organizations in the Hedera ecosystem, such as Bonzo, Builder, Hashgate, Hashpack, Hgraph, Neuron, Tashi, Geoscribe, Syntax, and Tournament. And under this umbrella, we've developed what we're calling HCS specifications that create these transactions. So you're probably wondering, what are HCS specifications? So essentially, if you look at other ecosystems, you have things like JSON schemas that you could compare to. You also have things in the on-chain world called meta protocols, which have been very pioneered inside ecosystems like Bitcoin through ordinals and ruins. Also other networks like you've got other on-chain networks like Doge, for example, that have adopted these on-chain specifications for storing content and so forth. So essentially, they are on-chain patterns, application-level patterns and implementations for things like file storage, data registration, profile management, communication, and facilitation. Good examples of that are HCS1, HCS2, and TEM, which all enable these sorts of functionalities. They are, at its core, very much based on top of JSON schemas. So you have these predefined schemas to do certain things, like create files or register data. We have agreed upon fields for each specification that's built for HCS. We consider the fact that HCS is limited to 1 kilobyte messages And we try to optimize for that. We govern around that, and we're very particular in how these fields are put into these standards and what's needed and what's not needed, or how we recursively pull in data in different places like registries. So you'll see fields that are shorthand like op, m, c, and o, and all of these have enumerations and definitions that tie back to them that can be utilized inside of a open source software like an SDK. And they're built on top of the Hedera consensus service. They're stored immutably on Graph. They utilize topic IDs primarily, as well as the memo field inside of topics or the account memo field and so forth. You'll find them in places that link to areas inside of the Hedera token service, for example, or the Hedera account service. So as of today, we have over 21 of these standards that are out. Not all of these standards have been published and have gotten the nod of publishing through the DAO, but many of them are. And they cover areas such as registration, files, recursive linking of data, governance, communication of agents, and so forth. So, for example, kind of coming into, I think I've painted a really wide picture of what HCS is, and I kind of want to just get in a little bit of the weeds of how you actually use these standards and how you can conceptualize it. So a good example of this is HCS1, and this was actually a similar slide that I had done during HederaCon. So for example, at HCS1, it enables you to store and retrieve files on Graph using the Hedera consensus service. So imagine you have a 4 kilobyte JPEG. What we do with that JPEG, essentially, first, we create a new topic on Hedera consensus service. And then we take that JPEG and we break it up into 4 little pieces, because you can only put 1 kilobyte per message in the Hedera consensus service. So we take those 4 pieces and we write them as messages into that topic ID. And then we compress those messages before we store them using an algorithm like ZSTD, for example, so we can get the size down a little bit. And then inside places like wallets, for example, Hashpack, they will be able to call that topic ID, pull in those pieces, stitch them back together, and then you have that JPEG. But the actual contents of the file are stored through the consensus service itself. So inside of each standard, we have these specified message structures. And every standard is different, but they do share similar field names in many places that you can look back to. HCS1 was one of our first standards, and the way it works is each message has 2 primary fields inside of it that you refer back to. There is an O field that orders the messages, and there's a C field that has the content of the actual message. So each C inside of the message, there could be hundreds of these, is the actual compressed 1 kilobyte chunk that's put into that message, for a little bit less than kilobyte, so that we can fit into the actual message. And then we have the O field, which orders it. And the O field is really important inside of HCS1 because it means that you can create a 100 kilobyte image and submit all the transactions at the same time, because you don't have to do it sequentially, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and wait for each transaction to settle. You do them all at the same time in parallel if you want. And then you have the O field, which you can use to sort the actual file contents later on when you want to stitch back the image. So it's great at scale. And actually, this weekend, somebody was doing an inscription that generated an additional 500,000 transactions for the network. And this was done in just 24 hours because of the parallel effect that you can kind of put all this data in at the same time using HCS1 specifications. So coming into Hiero, we have all of these standards today, and Hashgraph Online would like to donate the existing HCS specifications and place them under the Hiero umbrella inside of a new GitHub repository, which should be Hiero HOL HCS specs. These specifications, and because they live in their own GitHub repository, they follow the existing governance that's set up under HCS4, which defines a process from draft to publish. And that's essentially where the DAO goes in. We act as a maintainer community, and we make sure that the specification actually makes sense. Anyone can create a draft standard and merge it in. But when we feel like it's ready and we really want to talk about it in the public, then we mark it as published. And at that point, you can version the actual specification if there are new iterations of it, because these things are immutable once you put them on the Hedera consensus service. So you want to get it right the first time. As part of this proposal, we are suggesting that there can be a HIP inside of the Hiero improvement proposals, which is essentially a index of all of the specifications, including the ones from this repository. And it's kind of like an ordered list of all the specifications with the commit hash linking to where you can find the specification. Optionally, and this is not required at all, if we want to, we can have the TSC vote on ratifications to this index. In past conversations, we may be seeing that this isn't really required at all, but it's an option if we're kind of interested in having that initial governance on top of it inside of the ratification index. So what are the benefits to Hiero for bringing in these standards under the umbrella? Number one, wider adoption. The HCS specs that we've made are already used by companies and developers in the Hiero ecosystem today. We've generated over 32 million transactions, and this SDK that we have has over 1,000 weekly downloads at least. The standards give teams a direct path from idea to production for application layer things with the Hedera consensus service for storage, registries, points, and agents. From the ecosystem side, moving HCS into vendor-neutral LLDT projects signals more stability and long-term stewardship to enterprises and partners. And a single well-governed repo reduces fragmentation and encourages partners to converge inside of the ecosystem as well. So for example, Hashgraph Online works with many startups. We work with many folks on the enterprise side. We are talking to folks from A to MCP and so forth. And this would provide another signal for them to get involved with these standards and therefore increase more developer adoption inside the Hiero community. And as an added bonus, since Hashgraph Online is already developing these standards and providing marketing, this would provide additional an initial maintainer group that is overseeing these standards as stewards. We would actively develop new standards, we'd promote adoption, and we'd market the usage of HCS specifications within Hiero. So it's a mutually beneficial campaign kind of to bring these into the wider fold. So I know that one of the things or discussions around this is, well, this would create basically standards or specifications that sit outside of the Hiero improvement proposal repository that we have today. So we did some research and we found that there are other examples in the LFDT ecosystem that have gone through a similar pathway. So for example, at Hyperledger, they have the Indy hypes, which are enhancement proposals tied to indies or ledger network behaviors. A non-creds is another example. In Trust over IP, they have the JDF and they have the TOP track. There's also the first person project inside of the Trust over IP ecosystem. And these are all running in their own working groups or their own projects that are inside of the LFDT project itself. So they're inside of that same umbrella, but they have their own governance processes or standards or ideation processes inside of them. Fabric inside of Hyperledger and Fabric Core is another example that follows this as well. So that's a high-level overview into the project proposal. There's also the GitHub issue that goes into a little bit more detail than the actual presentation that I ran through. You can see how the repo would be set up with the different standards. We would try to preserve the commit history when we eventually move into Hiero, and we cover how the HIP / index process would work as well. So that's pretty much it on my side. What do you guys think?
Thanks, Michael, for that presentation. I see Agex unmutes. So I assume, Agex, you have a question or comment?
Yeah, no, again, I don't see any conflict. Obviously, this is done at an application layer outside the Happy, so it basically sits on top uh, of the APIs, no different than what's been done in other either application layer or data intensive projects like has been done for carbon markets and so forth. So I think that this is valuable. It extends the stack into the application layer more deeply, and the level of standardization for conformance in use is beneficial from an adoption point of view. Particularly in the enterprise space. So I think I'm supportive of this type of work as part of the overall Hiero mandate in general, and we've done the same thing with DIDs and things like that, where we are working with specifications outside, leveraging the Hiero services, but driven by external use cases.
Yeah, hi, Ash here. I agree with you, Alex. I think this exemplifies the community aspect of governance for our various standards that don't directly impact the layer one. I think this sets a good standard and exemplifies how the Hedera community can come together to contribute and set standards on their own. Yeah, I think this sets a great precedent. Thank you, Michael.
Thanks, guys.
Any other questions, comments? I have some, but maybe others want to go first. Okay, so I think it would be great to get that to Hiero, first of all, right? So the idea to bring that to Hiero, I'm all in. I have some concerns where I believe we need to discuss how all that fits together, which is three concerns or points I have that I would like to discuss. And I know today time is not long enough for that, so I assume we need to do that in the next meeting, but I can already mention them. So one, and Michael know it, is the name. So I think the name says, more or less nothing. My assumption is we need to find a better name, and if it's a fantasy name, like I assume that would be better than because I'm already forgot now how the repo is named. And that is not because I want to forget it. It's really, it's like three letters, and then something. I assume we can find a better name here. Maybe it's just me, but that is one concern I have. The second concern I have is, or where I want to understand it better, is how all that works together with HIPs. So when we discussed where we just came from, the DID topics, and that there will be several new DID methods coming up that we would like to integrate as a specification into the Identity Hub, we decided that should be done by a HIP. So whenever a new DID method identity specification should be added to the hub, and HIP should be created for that. Next to that, we decided that this is not an HIP where for each and every DID method the TSC needs to vote on. We said it could be an application HIP. I personally would like to extend HIP types and create a DID method HIP for that to really have something very specific. And when it comes to the HCS or Hashgraph Online specifications, I would really like to use the same, to say like, hey, instead of you have currently HCS4, where you specify the workflow, how a new specification is created, how to vote on it, and so on. And my question is if we can bring that into the HIPs as a special HIP type. I'm not saying the TSC need to vote on it. I'm not saying Hedera need to vote on it, but to have one place for our improvement proposals, for one place where we define specifications. I think that would be a big benefit, instead of having multiple ways within Hiero for that. And the third one is standards versus specs. So especially if I understood it correctly, with the current proposal, your goal is to bring in the spec. So not the code, not the SDK, but the specs. And I think especially with a project which is as new as Hashgraph Online is, I would like, when it comes to Hiero, to talk about a spec and not a standard, because a standard needs an implementation. It needs really, really wide adoption. I wish that it goes there. Don't get me wrong, but when talking about it under the scope of Hiero, I would really like to make it clear that this is a spec. So those are my 3 points. As said, I assume too much to discuss today. Yeah. Any direct thoughts on that, Michael?
Sorry.
Oh, somebody else.
I think
Alex?
it's Alex. I think just when you talk about standards versus specifications, one of the things you mentioned was having broad adoption. But I think it's kind of putting the cart before the horse. A lot of times standards are developed and then they get adopted. So you have a standard and people wait until the standard is in place. Now, there's a semantic thing. What's the difference between a standard and a specification, right? A specification is a series of criteria. A standard is an agreed upon set of criteria, right? So a specification says, a 2-inch nail, right? But a standard would be if you're nailing 2 boards together that are nominally, I don't know, 12 millimeters wide, you need to have a 25 millimeter nail to join them together, right? So just being clear on what is a specification versus what is a standard, that make sure that we're accurately using that terminology, that ontology, in a manner that's consistent across the board. Then I think as long as we're doing that, then we're good. I don't think the amount of utilization is one of those criteria that says whether it's a standard or a specification.
Sure.
Just a comment.
Yeah. And maybe it's again just me, right? Like with the name, I'm just talking here as Hendrik, as a person, But for me, it is always like a spec is, we have written down how it should be. That is what HGS 1, 2, 3, and so on do. I totally like it. That is what I call a spec, and a standard is something which has like multiple implementations. So if we would now have like an SDK for Rust, an SDK for, I don't know, PHP and whatever, and all of them are based on the spec, then I would call it a standard. Maybe that's again my personal point of view, but that is how I always try to make the difference. A specification is something written down which says those are the guidelines that make sense, and if that is adopted by really multiple partners in multiple ways, then we have a standard. Maybe I'm wrong. As said, it's yeah.
Again, maybe that's something for the TSC to reference. Here is the taxonomy that we are basing our structure around.
Yeah.
If we can point to a normative, a standard, as it were, a standard of standards, that might help address some of the potential confusion.
Totally agree. Yeah, and as said, so for me, 2 are weak arguments. The one with aligning it with the hips, that would be a big wish. Those two, if we get it aligned with the hips and we have the other two, I won't be a blocker for sure, not.
Yeah. Agreed.
Michael.
Yeah, I think we're not too married to specifications versus standards. I think, like, as Alex, it's kind of semantics, right? And the project proposal is actually Hiero HOL HCS specs, and the presentation also references them as specs per that feedback. As far as hips, I think that's going to be the thing that we're going to have to figure out the most. I don't see these being hips. I think that's going to be very difficult to get across. I think it's very important that they are their own repository, their own project. It's in their own repo. That have their own structure and usage, mainly because they do not impact the network layer. And I understand the idea of creating a subcategory in hips. But I think that when you put it in a subcategory inside of hips, then it limits the visibility of these. And these are quite visible and they attract a lot of people. When they have their own place and their position within the Hiero ecosystem, it's mutually beneficial for Hiero because it captures wide audiences from the partners that we talk to. And for example, with AI ecosystems in A to A and MCP, and we can show these things, and it's on the top level of Hiero. I think that brings a lot of attention and awareness, and it gets people to collaborate. When it's inside of a bigger thing that's inside of a network level thing, then I think it puts people off. I think that's a large part of it. I think also for continuity of the work that's been done today, it helps a lot to have it visible inside of its own project.
I think there's a gap between or let's say, maybe you misunderstood some points here. So when talking about the did methods, I do not want that the full specification of those did methods is done in a HIP and lives in a HIP. This specification of a did method should live in the identity hub. But since it's something people will vote on, since it's something we call it a spec, there should be a higher improvement proposal for it. What the content of that proposal is then maybe linking to others. That is why I'm saying I don't like to just say it's an application HIP. Maybe we need to rethink then to be more flexible with some HIPs to say like, hey, the content of this HIP is defined here, but we have it in a HIP in all the HIP lists so that, and I see what you had there. I was not 100% understanding that.
Okay, then based on what you're saying, I think we're actually aligned. That is, I think we're saying the same thing, but maybe like a different implementation of it. So what we're suggesting essentially is we have the project, it's its own GitHub repo. And then inside of the Hiero improvement proposals, there is an application HIP. It doesn't have to be an application HIP. We want it to be something we want to vote on, but it's basically an index of all of the HCS standards, and it links to a commit SHA/version inside of that project. And then it creates that additional visibility inside of the Hiero improvement proposal. It's kind of like a ratification index, essentially.
My first question would be, but maybe we can continue that on next week because we're already 10 minutes over. Why not having that per HCS spec instead of having one with a bullet point of links, having, a one-to-one relation? But I'm seeing Alex's hands up too.
No, I was actually going to say something similar, saying an alternative would be basically a HCS pointer HIP. Basically, it is a wrapper that points to the normative document that's in the other repo. So it's being incorporated for completeness within kind of the Hiero ecosystem, but it is included by reference only, not as a procedural element that goes through a approval workflow. So that's just another thought. But again, it just serves as a wrapper.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I'm happy to adjust the proposal and I'll update this presentation.
And I was just going to say the reason I was thinking about that is if you have one mega index HIP, people might not get visibility into changes because the numbers would be consistent. So say, oh, I know about that HIP. Well, there's been maybe 12 additions to it that you're not familiar with. If you see some of the new ones popping up, that would potentially draw more visibility to what's new.
Right, and then you have the version history inside of the HIP as well.
Correct.
I think that makes sense.
Cool. Okay, that was already a very good discussion. I was assuming way more discussion on that topic. But with that, I assume, Michael, maybe you can give an update next week on it, and maybe we then next week good for voting already. We will see. First of all, thanks for the presentation. Once you have updated the slides, maybe you can share it on the TSC channel too, so that people can have already look at it. And for everybody else, thanks for being here. The marketing community meeting is already running since 12 minutes. I will now jump over to that meeting and invite you all to come with me. Otherwise, see you in any other Hiero meeting. Thank you.
Perfect.
Bye.
Thank you.